You cannot solve an experiential problem with a rational answer. I didn't quite appreciate this until I became a pastor. So in my early 20s, the church where we were already attending, serving, they hired me, my first full-time ministry position as an assistant pastor, but they didn't have any space for me, so they took the office closet. No joke. And they said, "We've made you an office." So this closet, it was a nice closet, no windows. I was so excited. My first full-time ministry job, my first office, and I'm sitting there, like literally my first week in my office, and I hear a knock on the door. Someone pops their head in. This woman I know from the church pops her head in to say hi. And I'm like, "Oh," and then I'm like, "Oh, how are you? We've been praying for you." So this woman was a family friend, and we had visited her in the hospital the week prior, not because she was in the hospital, but because her 14-year-old son had stage 4 cancer. And it was just like devastating their family, understandably. So with that, she paused and asked, "Hey, could I just talk to you for a minute?" And so she comes in to my closet, sits down across from me. She says, "I am really struggling to make sense of all this. Why would God let this happen?" I don't remember what I said. Something about Job, something about Jesus. I don't quite remember what I said, but I do remember how I felt, because I felt so helpless. Like, what do you say? What would you say? Now, it's not that I couldn't answer the question, because I knew the right answers. I'd spent years at seminary learning the right answers. I could probably have written a really excellent paper on the topic, but sitting in front of a mom whose son is dying of cancer, all of my answers felt cheap and meaningless and worthless. They felt like Hebel. So for years, I'd studied, attended seminary, read deeply so that I might answer those types of questions, or so I thought. But in the place of grief and doubt and suffering and confusion and frustration, I realized that the type of answer that someone needs in that place isn't the type of answer that you can learn from a class or from a book. You can't solve an experiential problem with a rational answer. We need something more. We need a different type of answer. Now, this isn't to say that rational answers are worthless or don't matter. Of course they matter. Of course they're worth something. It's just to say that when you come to the edge of human understanding, or when you come to the end of yourself through like suffering or mystery or like these questions that you just can't answer, when you come to that point, having the right answer simply isn't enough. It can't give you peace. It can't fill the void in your heart. It can't quiet the ache in your soul. We need a different type of answer. And oftentimes, we don't even realize this until someone actually gives us the right answer. Like we think we just need answers. I just need answers. But then someone gives us a well thought out, rational answer, and we realize that's not it. Like that doesn't solve anything. It doesn't heal what's broken in me. Like it changes nothing because it doesn't answer our real questions. Are you guys familiar with a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? You don't really need to know it. Science fiction story. But it's important. The story, it tells the story. It's an epic quest to answer this. The ultimate question of life, the universe and everything, right? They're going on this epic quest to answer that. And so they travel across the universe to this supercomputer called Deep Thought. And this computer has been built just to answer this very question. And it spent 7.5 million years computing the answer. So they travel across the universe, finally get to the computer. The answer is finally there. And they're like, "Yes, tell us, what's the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything?" And the computer answers, 42. Just 42. That's it. And they're like, "Are you kidding me? We've been waiting 7.5 million years for this? What does that even mean? And the computer says, it only seems meaningless because you never really understood the question. Our text for today is Ecclesiastes chapter 5. It's 541 in the Pew Bible. And Ecclesiastes chapter 5 feels a bit like that. For the past 4 chapters, the teacher of Ecclesiastes has been searching everywhere under the sun for answers. He's been looking everywhere. In fact, if you count the phrase, I see, you see it everywhere. I see. I see that I cannot find happiness by chasing it. I see that no amount of alcohol or work or achievements or education or arts can fill the hole in my heart. I see that the seasons of life are completely outside of my control. I see that injustice and oppression and suffering come both for the righteous and the unrighteous, both for the 90-year-old and for the 14-year-old. And I'm really struggling to make sense of it all. Like, why would God let this happen? How do we make sense of this? What is the meaning in all of this? And none of the answers that he can come up that seem to satisfy. All of his words feel cheap and So in chapter 5, he's going to suggest to us a different type of answer. I want you to follow me here. This is an answer that doesn't actually answer any of our questions, and yet somehow answers all of them in a way that is better than a rational answer. So let's get some sense of this, and then we'll dive in. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, starting in verse 1, reads like this: Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen, rather than offer the sacrifices of fools who do not know that they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven, you are on earth, so let your words be few. So I want you to appreciate, this is the moment at the end of the book of Job. For 37 chapters, Job has been crying out with all these questions. Why, God? Why is this happening to me? Why are you letting me suffer? How am I supposed to make any sense of this? And Job's friends, they come alongside and say, hey, let me give you a nice rational explanation for this. And it's really unhelpful. Really unhelpful. And then in chapter 38, God himself shows up in the whirlwind and says, Job, I have some questions for you. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Can you make an ocean? Can you make it rain? Have you ever made a universe? Do you understand how it is that you're alive right now? And Job chapter 40, verse 4, Job says, I'm speechless. And he puts his hand over his mouth. He's just silenced. God's presence, it answers nothing, but we find there, somehow it is an answer. Somehow it answers nothing and it answers everything at the same time. And so this is where the teacher of Ecclesiastes wants us to go today. That maybe we're looking, the answers we're looking for aren't found in seeing, I see, but maybe we need to stop talking and we need to listen. Instead of seeing, we need to hear. Instead of speaking, we need to listen. Instead of my words, it needs to be in God's word. But it's not found in what I can do for myself, but in being with God. We need to stop talking and start listening. And when we do this, something happens. Our questions, they begin to quiet within us. And we can begin to hear God's questions for us. Where are you? What are you looking for? Who do you say that I am? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And somehow this answer, while technically not answering anything, the teacher thinks it's more satisfying than any of the answers he can find on his own. So let's see if we can make some sense of this. Let's go back to verse 1 and walk through this step by step here. It begins like this: guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Literally, the first words are, it's just the idea of watch your step. Pay attention to your feet. Pay attention to how you are walking. So this language of walking in the Hebrew Scriptures is really big. It both has literal and metaphorical and even symbolic meaning. All these layers going about. And some of this is just really, really practical. In the ancient Near East, you literally walk everywhere, all the time. Huge portions of your day are spent walking. So this then becomes a metaphor for just the way you do life, what we might call our lifestyle. So the teacher starts out by saying, when you come to God with all of your questions about the meaning of life, about your doubts, about your confusion, about your anxieties, stop and examine your life. Look at how you're living. Consider the pace at which you're running. Look at how you do or do not relate to your spouse, your kids, your neighbors, your coworkers. Pay attention to how you eat and drink and sleep and exercise. Look at your credit card statements. What do they say about what you value? Look at what color jersey you're wearing right now. Praise God, you have courage. Consider your screen time. Look at how you're living. Look at yourself before you come into the house of God. Before you come to God with all of your questions, maybe you should question yourself. So we see this dramatically, symbolically, in Exodus chapter 3. Moses, the shepherd, he's out there in the field, and then he sees this strange sight. There's this bush that's burning, but it's not burning. What is this bizarre thing? And he walks up to it, and what does the voice from the bush, God himself, say? He says, don't come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is holy ground. Now, practically, he's a shepherd. Are his feet any cleaner than his sandals? No. Taking off his sandals does not make him literally clean. So why is God asking him to do this? Because it's symbolic. Before you enter into God's presence, you need to look at your feet. You need to watch your life. You need to watch where you've been walking. The Apostle Paul will say this to Timothy, watch your life and doctrine closely. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Examine yourself. So the ancient Jews, they took this practice of self-examination so seriously that they literally built it into the architecture of the ancient temple. So 1960s, the archaeologist unearthed this at the Temple Mount. This is the southern steps. So if ever that country is safe again, maybe we can lead a team back and we can actually go right to this very place. So these are the southern steps. This is what in ancient times was the main entrance into the Temple Mount. And this is in the back there is the Mount of Olives. So we know this is we know almost certainly of any places in the world where Jesus literally stepped these steps. He almost certainly stepped on these very steps from the Mount of Olives coming into the Temple Mount. So here's the thing. When you come up to the steps, there's something curious about them. You notice that they are intentionally staggered. They alternate between 12-inch steps, narrow, and wide steps, 35-inch steps, then 12 inches, then 35. Now this feels, if you walk them, it feels like a design flaw. Like it's really, it messes with you. Like it's hard, wait, where do I step? Like the only way to walk up those steps is if you look down and pay attention to every step you take. You have to look down and pay attention to your feet. You have to slow down and watch how you're walking before you can enter into the Temple Mount. Get it? Huh? This is intentional. That's the point. Before you come into the presence of God, you have to slow down and pay attention to how you're walking, how you're living. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. So the word sacrifice here is, there's a couple different words for sacrifice. This is the one referring to, it would usually be a sacrifice of gratitude or thanksgiving, a fellowship offering. So this is the one where you take the whole bull or the whole lamb, you slaughter it at the temple, you barbecue the whole thing up, you invite all your friends out, and you throw a huge feast. I mean, this would look more like your Super Bowl party than what we're doing right now. This is how you were to worship. You would have this feast with God, at God's house, in his honor. Do you get it? This is the image. So here's the thing, though. It's a meeting. It's meeting God at his dinner table, which is great and is supposed to be great. But have you ever shared a meal with a couple that is getting ready to go through divorce, and yet the whole time they just act like everything's fine? Like, awkward doesn't begin to describe that feeling, does it? I've been at that table. It's unpleasant. In the same way, if you come to God's table and pretend like everything's great, when in fact your relationship with God is anything but great, well, awkward doesn't begin to describe it. He says that is the sacrifice of fools. The person who thinks they can eat with God but has a broken relationship with him and hasn't made that right yet. It's the person who thinks that if I just give a little extra in the offering plate, I can live however I want. That if I just show up to church, God will ignore the rest of my week. It's the person who thinks that if I can somehow, if I pray the right prayers and do the right things, I can somehow force God to do what I want, to give me what I want in life. And this was quite a problem in ancient Israel. So the prophet Amos, he describes at length how the Israelites would have these huge, ornate worship celebrations. I mean, everyone was there. They're cheering on God. They're throwing these big parties. They're all saying the right words. They're all lifting their hands. They're making these lavish offerings to God. And if you looked on it from the outside, you'd be like, revival's breaking out. These people must really love God, if you saw them at the temple. But if you saw them the rest of the week, you would see that they're taking bribes, cheating on their spouses, spreading lies, buying high-end fashion, buying second homes while orphans and widows were starving, and occasionally worshiping other gods. So through the prophet Amos, God has a message for them. He says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Stop it. Stop showing up to worship. Just stop worshiping me. I don't want you to come to me like that. Stop thinking you can completely ignore me and then come to my table and act like everything's fine. It's not fine. I hate it. Those are strong words. You see, when how you worship doesn't shape how you live, you are in danger of offering the sacrifice of fools. When how you worship doesn't shape how you live, you're in danger of offering the sacrifice of fools. In my early 20s, I went through this rebellious phase. And my version of rebellion at the time was to attend an Anglican church. I am such a rebel, yeah. Others get like tattoos and motorcycles. I went to an Anglican church, yeah. So I grew up in a church that was the furthest thing you could imagine from an Anglican church. And I was just curious. I just had to see for myself, what's all this sit, stand, kneel, and genuflect, and I don't know, creeds. I had to be part of it. I had to check it out. So I went and started attending this Anglican church. And I have to say, there is something to it. If you have never experienced like high church Anglican liturgy, it's something. But the difference between me and the average Anglican attender at this small church that I attended was that at the time I was like neck deep in seminary, studying the Bible, church history, and the like. So every piece of the liturgy, every single piece, it was deeply meaningful to me. I got the references. I understood the connection with scriptures. I understood the deeper symbolism. I could see Jesus in every act, in every word, in every movement, in everything we did. And I was moved by it. But then something happened. I attended, I don't know, maybe a year into it. And then I started to look around. And I noticed something. The only two people who were deeply moved by that service were me and the rector. Like literally every other person, there was like this distant look in their eyes. Total disconnect. So for me, it was all fresh and new and rich. And for them, it was all like they'd been doing this their whole lives. So they were literally just going through the motions, just mouthing the empty words. They had been through the liturgy so many times that it had become empty and meaningless, all form, no substance, that the people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. But it's not just liturgical worship that can be emptied of meaning. In college, I got into a group of friends who were self-proclaimed super charismatics. And so I joined their prayer group. I was like, this is amazing. Again, part of my rebellion here. I was like, I'm missing out. And they were speaking in tongues and giving prophetic words and slaying in the Spirit all the time. And I was like, holy cow, they know God so much more deeply than I do. What's wrong with me? And then one day, the guy who led our prayer group tried to manipulate me into having sex with him by telling me that he had received a prophetic word from God. And I was like, that is not the voice of God you're hearing. It then came out that several of the members who were leading that prayer group, after the prayer group, were living in gross sexual immorality. So let me be clear here. I am not rejecting liturgy or movements of the Spirit. I am not. In fact, if you could give me liturgical charismatics, that would be awesome. I'm simply pointing out that when acts of worship, be they historical and liturgical or personal and emotive, when they lose their connection with your living, ongoing, daily walk with God, your relationship with God, how you walk with God throughout the week, when your worship loses its connection with your walk with God, they are emptied of their power and meaning, and they become the sacrifice of fools. So the teacher, he pleads with us. He's like, don't let that happen. Rather, examine yourself, watch how you walk. And he says, go near, not to offer the sacrifice of fools, but go near to listen. So the Hebrew here, the word listen, this is one of the few Hebrew words you're probably familiar with. It's Shema. And Shema can be translated listen. It does mean listen, hear, listen. But it means so much more than this. So Shema is the first word in the prayer of the ancient Jews, the prayer that they would pray morning, noon, and night. In fact, this is the prayer that Jesus himself would have prayed every morning, noon, and night. This is the prayer that shaped the people of God. So this prayer, in fact, it's referred to simply as the Shema. That's what it is. So this is how it goes, Deuteronomy 6. Shema, hear, listen, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. These commandments that I give to you are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your forehead. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Do you hear this? When the teacher says, go near to Shema, he's not just talking about some simple listening act. He's talking about Shema, this. So when you go near to God, go near to the Lord who is one. He is singular. He's incomparable. He's completely unified. He's not broken to pieces like we are. He's unlike anyone or anything. He is one. Go near to him who is number one in your life. And in his presence, then you take time to collect yourself. You pull together all the pieces of yourself, your heart, your soul, your strength. You pull all of these pieces together and you seek to love him with everything. With everything you have, with everything you are, with your strength and mind and soul and emotions, everything. You try and love him with that. And in this place of drawing near and loving him with your whole being, you listen in such a way that his words, well, they shape how you parent, how you eat, how you relax, how you walk along the road, how you fall asleep at night. They shape everything you do, your hands, every word you say, every thought you have, every door you choose to enter or not enter. It shapes everything in your life. That's what it means to go near to Shema. It's not just listening to facts or doctrines or truth or just empty words. It's encountering the God of the universe. It's relational and personal. It's listening to the voice of the one who loves you, the voice of the beloved. It's not just listening with your mind. It's listening also with your heart and your soul and your strength, all of you. It's not just an outward act. It has to work its way out in your body, in your parenting, in your shopping, in your sleeping, in your exercising, in everything. To listen in this way is to be transformed. To listen in this way is to let his words form you deeply. Now I want you to notice the type of answer the teacher is talking about here. When we come to God with all of our questions and doubts and concerns and confusion, he doesn't scramble to answer all of our questions. He doesn't do that. Instead, he says, hey, come here. Eat with me. Sit at my table. Slow down. Take time to collect yourself. Pull everything you have in love together. Let your words quiet down so that my words can be spoken over you and you can receive them. Shema. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven, you are on earth, so let your words be few. So I don't have to explain this because Jesus already explained this for us in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus speaking, and when you pray, do not keep on babbling, blah, 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 like pagans, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. That if you think that you have to work yourself up into some like emotional frenzy in order to get God's attention, or if you think that you have to repeat over and over again, like if I say 150 Hail Marys, then God will listen to me. If that's what you think, you've misunderstood. You've misunderstood who God is and what prayer is. You're praying like someone who does not know God. Don't do that. You see, in other ancient religions, for a prayer to work, you had to be in the right place at the right time, in the right spot with the right people, and you had to say just the right words, and then maybe the God would hear you and respond to your prayer. But Jesus says, God isn't like that. Don't do that. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. God is not some distant God who doesn't care for you. He's your Father. He already knows what you need. You do not have to earn his attention. He's already giving you his full attention. His face is turned towards you. Verse 3, a dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool. So if you try and control everything in your life, then you will never be able to shut off your mind, not even at night. You will never be able to shut it off. And if you try to control God by praying the right prayers or lots and lots of prayers, you will never be able to stop talking. That's probably what that means. Old Testament scholar Derek Kidner points out that the word dream here, though, could mean daydream, which would suggest that he's not talking about what happens in your bed at night, but he's talking about what happens at a worship service. Follow the logic here. So imagine you show up to church, you mouth the right words, you sing the right songs, you nod, maybe even give the appropriate, like, amen or go Eagles or whatever's appropriate at the time, right? You're there, your body is there, present the whole time, but your mind is somewhere else. The whole time, your mind is thinking about, all that things you got to do on your to-do list, or what you're going to serve at the Super Bowl party, or those emails you have to respond to, or so on and on and on. Your mind, you're daydreaming about all the other things. Now, of course, that would never happen in our church, so it couldn't mean that. Verse 4. Yeah. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger, my vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the works of your hands? So here the teacher, he addresses one particularly dangerous way in which we might be tempted to try and force God to do what we want, to answer our questions, to give us what we want in life. It's this thing called vows. Now, in the Old Testament, making a vow to God appears to be fairly common. Like you'd show up to the church service, you'd offer a sacrifice and get caught up in the moment and be like, God, I'm so sorry that I've forgotten you again, so I swear I'm going to read my Bible and pray every day. Or God, I'm recommitting my life to you. I'm never going to look at porn again. Or God, I'm not going to hold anything back anymore. I'm going to go on that mission trip to Guatemala, and I'm going to start giving 10% of everything I make to the church as a tithe. I promise, I swear. Or maybe more familiar to us, you walk down the aisle and stand before God and these witnesses, and you solemnly swear to love, honor, keep this person as my lawfully wedded spouse, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, as long as we both shall live, so help me God. Now, all of these things that I just mentioned, they're good. They're good. They're really good. But here's the question. What happens if you don't actually do what you just said you do? Huh? I mean, you try to, you want to, but then, but like you want to read your Bible and pray every single day, but then this work trip comes up and you just get off track a little bit, and then next thing you know, months passed. Or you really don't want to look at porn anymore, but then you just slip up. Or you really do intend to go to Guatemala and start tithing, but then you lose your job. Or you really did intend to stay married to that person until death do us part, but you didn't quite know what that meant when you said those words. You see, breaking a promise that you make to a business partner or to a spouse or to yourself, that is bad, and it will mess you up. It will mess up your life. Breaking a promise that you made to God, that is a whole new category. And promise is not quite the right word here. So what we're talking about here is a vow or swearing an oath. This is historically what would predate like modern contractual agreements. So let's say you want to go into business with Hezekiah over there, but you're not sure, can I trust this guy? Like he might take all my stuff and cheat me out of it. So what am I going to do? I know exactly what I'll do. I'm going to ask him to swear an oath. Repeat after me. I, Hezekiah, swear to God that I will keep my side of the deal, and if I don't, may all the curses of God fall upon me, so help me God. It's an ancient oath formula, and you still hear this sometimes, these bits of this in our language today. The nature of an oath is that you are calling upon God to be your witness, so that if you do not fulfill your vow, then you're calling upon him, get this, the technical word here, is to damn you. If I don't do what I just said, I want you to damn me. Kind of a big deal. Now you can see this is an effective way to get people to keep their word, right? But if you break your vow, well, you've just asked God to damn you. And that's not good. In fact, it's so bad that Jesus will say, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Keep it at that, keep it at that. Don't make vows, don't do it. Yes be yes, no be no. So if the stakes are this high, then why would someone make a vow to God? To understand this a bit, we might help if we think about the story of Jephthah. I'm sure that's what you're thinking of right now. Jephthah, Judges chapter 12. He's this guy who is a gang leader, no joke, who turned military commander. And he's getting ready to lead God's army out into battle. We're going to go fight them. And he says this, he makes a vow to the Lord. If you give me victory, and I quote, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph, I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. He makes this vow. He goes off. God gives him victory. He returns in triumph. And we read Judges chapter 12, verse 34. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of the timbrels? She was an only child. He has to sacrifice his only child because he swore to God that he would. Now, don't misunderstand this. If you're horrified by this, you're supposed to be. The book of Judges is written to horrify us. This is what we become apart from God. This is what we become when we try and do life on our own. But here's the question this story forces us to ponder. Why, Jephthah? Why did you make the vow in the first place? And the answer is because he thought that making the vow would force God to do what he wanted. He thought he could manipulate God. You see, in the other ancient Near Eastern religions, this is how it worked. We see this, 2 Kings chapter 3, you should read it sometime. The king of Moab sees that he's losing in battle, so he decides to sacrifice his son on the city walls to Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Chemosh changes the tide of the battle. It works! He's able to manipulate Chemosh into doing what he wants. So Jephthah thinks the God of the Bible is like that. He thinks that he can somehow manipulate and bribe God. But this is complete nonsense. God cannot be bribed. There is nothing you can give him that he doesn't already own. And more importantly, God doesn't need to be bribed. You don't have to win his attention by making some great sacrifice. You already have his attention. So this is the great tragedy of Jephthah. The vow was completely unnecessary. God was already ready to answer his prayers. And this is the tragedy of anyone who thinks that they need to make a vow to God in order to get him to hear them. So do you see what the teacher's up to here? In the same way that he's gone through all these pursuits of how to create a life of meaning on my own. Like he's tried money and success and pleasure and fame and education and arts and all these things to make, now he's trying religion on my own, in my own strength. Is there a way that I can manipulate God? Like none of these things are working. Can I manipulate God into making my life meaningful? But no amount of religious behavior, be it prayers, sacrifices, or vows to God, can give you a life of meaning and purpose. You cannot make yourself religious enough to make your life meaningful. When we turn acts of worship into yet another self-help project, we empty them of their true value and meaning, which is being in relationship with God. When we attempt to use religious behavior to manipulate God, we don't actually manipulate God. He cannot be manipulated. What we are actually doing is calling upon God to damn us. If we hope to find forgiveness and healing and meaning, then we have to stop trying to use religion to control God, and we need to entrust ourselves to him. We need to trust that he gives our lives meaning. We need to trust that he is making all things beautiful in its time. That from the outside, entrusting yourself to God in worship and manipulating God in worship, they look the same from the outside. But the heart posture is completely different. If we want to find the answers to life's biggest questions, we will not find it through the sacrifice of fools or through saying the right words and prayers. We will find the answer through entrusting ourselves to the God who we cannot control and cannot manipulate. And that is a fearful prospect. In fact, the teacher says as much. Much dreaming and many words are therefore, fear God. The Hebrew phrase, fear of the Lord or fear God, is almost untranslatable. It can mean fear. Like if you think in Venn diagram of like semantics of words, fear is a piece of that. But it can also mean listening to or obeying the Lord. It implies some kind of relational proximity. So to fear the Lord means that you're near the Lord. And to be near the Lord is to then be overwhelmed by his presence, by your own sinfulness, by his greatness and your smallness. It's the prophet Isaiah crying out, "Woe is me," which is the funeral cry. I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man. It's Job who for 37 chapters can't stop complaining. But as soon as the Lord shows up, he says, "I throw my hand over my mouth. There's nothing I can say." It's John in Revelation who, when he knew Jesus in his life prior to his resurrected glory, he was his best of friends. He was the one that Jesus loved. He reclined on Jesus. But when he sees the glorified Christ, what does he do? He falls like a dead man at his feet. He passes out. It's Simon Peter, when he realizes who Jesus is, he cries out, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." It is feeling so small and yet so deeply alive. It's standing before a hurricane or a raging wildfire, a power so great that you feel completely humbled and helpless. It's waking up to the reality that the very God of the universe knows everything. There's nothing. He knows you better than you know yourself. And he still loves you. The teacher says, if you want to find your meaning in life, you have to entrust yourself to that God. Now, if you're like, Anderson, you are crazy. Why would I entrust myself to God? That sounds terrifying. I can appreciate that. If all I knew about God was what the teacher said here in Ecclesiastes, I don't know. It would be hard. But let me remind you that the teacher asks the questions that the rest of the Bible answers, and the answer is Jesus. You can completely give yourself to God in love because in Jesus, God already completely gave himself to you in love. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that while we were yet sinners, he came after us. While we were going our own way, headed towards destruction, he came after us. He sought us out. He showed us how to walk with God and said, "Follow me. I will show you the way to life that is truly life, the fullness of life." But even then, we had broken our vows to God and one another. We had cursed ourselves. And rather than let us be damned, he took our curses upon himself on the cross. He died so that we might live. He fully entrusted himself to God. And then God, 3 days later, raised him from the dead so that we know he has defeated death. He has defeated the curse. And that if we would follow him, if we would entrust ourselves to the one who's already given himself for us, then that same love, that same life would begin working in us. And that would give us hope. That would give us meaning. It would be the answer that would quiet all the questions. It's found in relationship with him alone. And it's one of those things, it's not enough to know the right answers. You have to give yourself to him. You have to entrust yourself to him, knowing you can't control him. You can't manipulate him. And is it terrifying? It's terrifying. He might ask you to do something crazy, like become a pastor. Go to Guatemala. Give 10% of all your wealth. Stop looking at porn. Stay faithful to your spouse. But it's the answer that we know that he's taken the curse upon him so that when we come into the presence of God and we fear that utter shame, that guilt, all that stuff rise up in us like, I can't be here, I can't entrust myself to him. He steps forward and speaks a better word. He says, "Fear not, I am with you. I'm with you. I died for you. I got this. So you can trust me." When we come to the teacher with all of our doubts and confusions and questions about the meaning of life, he doesn't give us a rational argument. He gives us a different kind of answer. He says, hey, you got to watch your steps. Watch how you're walking. Look at your life. Question yourself. And then draw near to God. Go near to God. Recognize his presence. Now, we are not physically in a temple right now, but the Apostle Paul says we are the temple. God's presence is here. It's in us. And stop talking. Stop trying to manipulate God. Stop trying to convince him. Stop trying to earn his attention. You already have it. And listen, Shema, gather all the pieces of yourself. Love him. Let his word reshape you from the inside out. And then fear God. Sit in his good, amazing, all-powerful presence that you can't control. Let him overwhelm you. And so rather than try and explain this anymore, I want to invite you to experience just a taste of this. So I'm going to invite the band to come out, and I want to invite you to take a posture of listening, similar to what we do at the beginning of the service. Put your feet flat on the floor. If it's comfortable, close your eyes, open your eyes, whatever feels best or right to you. I prefer to open up my hands, and we're just going to take a couple minutes to do this, to sit in the presence of God, and whatever steps you need to take, whether you're just still examining your life, or recognizing his presence, or you're shemaing. You're trying to love him with everything you have and everything you are. Or you're waiting to hear that word that he wants to speak over you right now. Or you're just feeling his presence. You're fearing him. I'm going to leave it between you and God. I'm going to give you a couple minutes and then I'll close this. So as we close, I just want to invite you to entrust yourself to God, the God who loves you. Whether you've never done it before or whether you've done it before and you feel yourself pulling yourself back and trying to control your life and control God again, I just want to invite you to let go. You can do it right now by faith. It's not about having the right words, it's about your heart posture. It's simply opening up yourself to him and saying, I am helpless. I can't do it on my own. I need forgiveness and healing. And I know that on my own I will damn myself. I will ruin my life. I will not find the meaning that you've called me to. So I let go. I trust you. Because of Jesus, I know that I am forgiven and loved, and I repent of going my own way. I give myself to you. I want to love you with all of my heart, with all of my mind, with all of my soul, and all of my strength. Amen.